Good afternoon. Back in the saddle again. Have the privilege of temporarily chairing the Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation. Delegate Stolley is occupied elsewhere on campus and will be here post-haste, but everyone has other things they need to be attending to this afternoon, so we want to go ahead and take up business and move forward. When he comes, we'll turn over the gavel. What we'll do, we have three bills. We have Chairman Jones' House Bill number 765. We have, four bills. We have Delegate LaRock, House Bill 1489, Delegate Yancey, House Bill 453, and Delegate Bloxham, House Bill 575. I'm going to ask Ms. Owen to review each of these pieces of legislation, and when we have patrons, to have them come forward and tell us why we should support their bill. And we'll begin with the Chairman's bill, Chairman Jones, House Bill 765. Ms. Owen.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 765 builds on the previous transportation reforms that have been effective over the last 5 years to continue to try to strengthen the CTB and increase transparency. The main goal is to provide certainty for VDOT and local project sponsors that projects will be included in the 6-year program will actually be delivered. In terms of the elements of the bill itself, you'll see on lines 30 to 31 up through lines 54 to 60. It gives additional authority to the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment to develop the 6-year improvement program and oversee loan programs for the CTB. On lines 142 to 152, the next substantial change is adjusting the definition of urban and rural at-large members of the CTB. This is simply to reflect changes in federal definitions of urbanized areas to ensure that the pool of potential CTB members can include residents in areas such as Bristol, Stanton, Winchester, areas that we consider rural but are outside the current federal definitions. Lines 171 to 176, there's a requirement that all smart scale and state of good repair project must be fully funded to be included in the 6-year improvement program. This has been a policy of the CTB the last 2 years, but it was not something that has been codified to date. On lines 222 to 259, there's an update in VDOT reporting requirements to focus on the core responsibilities of the department, including allocation of the HLF funds, incident management, and aligning those with the alternating years in which smart scale projects are not selected. Because in the next section on lines 260 to 282, you'll see the Office of Intermodal Planning will have annual reporting on smart scale projects, performance measures and targets, aligning those reports with the biannual allocation of funds under smart scale. Finally, on lines 289 to 291, you'll see some changes to the existing revenue sharing program. You may recall that a few years ago, the cap on that program increased dramatically from $10 million to up to $200 million in light of the fact at the time that there were no secondary urban allocations available for localities. There's an attempt to provide some local funding with the passage of House Bill 1887. There's obviously funding going to the Smart Scale District Grant, so any money that goes to the revenue sharing program would come out of those grant programs, reducing funds available for other local projects. So this would reduce the locality cap from $10 million to $5 million, and the maximum amount that could go to the revenue sharing program in any 1 year from $200 million to $100 million, or 7% of the funds available to reflect growth over time. There's no fiscal impact to the legislation.
Thank you very much. Do members have questions about what has been described? So I think a big picture, House Bill 765 seeks to build on previous transportation reforms to strengthen CTB, increase transparency, and really get it to what it's intended to be, a true policy board with undertaking transportation planning and programming. We've been taking a number of steps in this direction over the years with the chairman's leadership, which is much appreciated. Questions or comments? Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this legislation? Mr. Donovan.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Nick Donahue, I serve as Deputy Secretary of Transportation, and the administration does support Chairman Jones's bill. As you noted, it builds on the reforms that we've collectively undertaken on a bipartisan basis over the past 4 years, and we would hope the committee to approve them.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, Delegate Sickles.
And then ask Secretary Donahue, the impact it might have on Northern Virginia jurisdictions having that revenue sharing program cut back so much.
Mr. Chairman, to Delegate Sickles' question, the provision in the bill codify what the CTB adopted after a year-long process where they interacted with stakeholders throughout the state. So the last round of revenue sharing was actually done under rules that mimic what is contained within this bill. The bill does two kind of key things for revenue sharing. Today, the program is anywhere between 50 and 200 million as set in the Appropriations Act. This would set a new kind of floor of at least 100 million, ensuring there will be at least that much in the fund. And then secondary, it sets a $5 million cap for any locality in a given year. Delegate Sickles, in the past, some Northern Virginia jurisdictions have applied at that top level of $10 million. So this would make it so that in a given year, they can only get 5. The flip side of that is when localities could apply for $10 million, what we found is sometimes all of the funding was used before you got to the second tier, which meant if you were a locality with a new project, you often couldn't get your project funded. So what this may do is reduce the amount a locality might get in a year, but will increase the likelihood that the locality will be able to access funds each round when they apply for revenue sharing.
Delegate Sickles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, what types of projects, are these projects that fix small areas or fix certain, not major construction projects that, how would you describe the kind of projects that qualify for these funds?
Mr. Chairman, to Delegate Sickles' question, I would say the typical project for the revenue sharing program costs less than $5 million in nature. I would note Northern Virginia, that figure is a little bit higher, but this is not something you would use to build an I-66, to do a Springfield interchange, to widen a Fairfax County Parkway, or other things of that nature.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Sickles. Any further questions or comments? I would just say, Mr. Donahue, thank you for working with the chairman on this legislation. Thank the administration as well. At one of the first meetings of our subcommittee, I raised a question to the commissioner regarding revenue sharing, and it seems like this takes a step in the direction I was hoping to go. I think it's a good piece of legislation, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Delegate Garrett.
Move to report 765 as substitute.
House Bill 765, motion to report as amended. Properly second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, please cast your votes on the electronic voting board. Close the roll. The bill reports as amended 7-0. Thank you, Delegate Garrett. We have Delegate Bloxham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
House Bill 575.
Yes, sir. The substitute is should be probably passed the subcommittee and the committee. This, you probably remember from this bill, this was a bill that I think Delegate Hodges fought for the budget amendment. But this is a standalone bill that whether it gets funded or not, I would like to see put in place. It's actually a structure that we can hopefully get revenues into or through, so we can start some dredging, maintenance dredging on, with our small creeks and rivers. Corps of Engineers no longer does shallow water dredging. All of our creeks, basically on both sides of the eastern shore and in the middle peninsula, they're all shallow water. So the Corps of Engineers will only do federally approved channels, if that, and they won't do any shallow water dredging. So, and all of ours are shallow water dredging. We're having a problem with commerce and trade just applying the waterways, really. So this sets up a mechanism that if it's funding, we're trying to go through the refundable fuel sales tax. You can get that back if you're a waterman for not using the road. It's road tax. Well, there is a portion of the fuel sales that is sitting out there. We're hoping from Delegate Hodges to redirect that. It's not new money, it's just redirecting it into this fund. That'll give us a revenue stream that then we can, this will be a competitive process. The Eastern Shore has ranked our waterways and the ones that are the most severely limited and with the one with the most commercial access or most commercial business will go first. And that's really trying to give us a mechanism that we can use to start some dredging on the shore.
Any questions of Delegate. Anyone here to speak in favor of House Bill 575?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Curtis Smith, of the Accomack Northampton Planning District Commission, speaking on behalf of the Eastern Shore Navigable Waterways Committee and Accomack and Northampton counties who strongly support this bill and the reallocation of funds to address our neglected waterways. These creeks are critical to our commercial seafood and recreational industries, which represent about a little over a $300 million annual economic impact for our roughly 45,000 citizens in Accomack and Northampton County. An assessment done by my office in 2016 found that 1/3 of our 27 state-maintained waterways were found to have shoaled to a level that is not practical for commercial or recreational use. In my lifetime, nearly 4 decades, there's been a period of neglect on these waterways, and there's been one funded project in my lifetime as an Eastern Shoreman citizen of the Commonwealth. And finally, just want to highlight that this is a multi-region collaboration in an effort to protect our working waterfronts and address our neglected waterways. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Crockett.
Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Robert Crockett, Municipal Planning District Commission. I'll echo everything that Mr. Smith just said. This has been a regional effort on behalf between the northern neck, the eastern shore, and the middle peninsula. So, and this is one of the efforts that we're trying to give our local governments the tool to fix our working waterfront situation. So we appreciate your support of this one.
Mr. Crockett, right there. I think we've already voted, not necessarily in this committee, but elsewhere in the House, voted to support House Bill 1091 that Delegate Hodges has. Were you working on that as well? Are you supporting that effort?
There's a number of provisions out in
So would that be considered a companion to this initiative, or are they in lieu of? Because it seems like, just looking at the summary of that, fresh in my memory, that looks to get financing through the VRA for any dredging program or project undertaken to benefit economic and community development goals, which sounds very similar to what I heard Mr. Smith talking about.
So that was an effort just to expand the scope of work that the ERA allows local governments to go after. This is actually create a funding grant program for VPA.
And Mr. Gray, just to follow up, are there funds going from VRA now for any of these types of projects?
I don't think so.
And is there any application in for funds through VRA?
I don't believe so, but I can check.
Doug Blossom.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I don't think the mechanism is there to actually do it yet. And this would be one of the mechanisms to try to help solve the problem.
I see. Okay. Other questions of the delegate? Yes, Delegate Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 questions, just for clarification. You said we were going to redirect funds, and where are those funds going to come from that we're redirecting?
Well, we have 2 questions there, because the budget amendment that Keith Hodges fought for and this bill, although they dovetail together, this is actually a standalone piece of legislation that even if it was not funded through the redirected funds, we would like this fund set up so we could direct VRA money or whatever through this. So we have a mechanism that projects can bid, and the highest ranked project could get funding. The fuel sales tax is what Delegate Hodges was talking about. There's a portion, you have road tax on every gallon of gas sold. As a commercial waterman, I can send in the gallons I use and get a certain amount of my money back because I'm not using the road. So there's a portion of marinas that sell fuel tax, and that tax is sitting out there. It's supposed to be used, I would like it to be used for maintenance of waterways because that's where the actual gas is being sold and used on.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Delegate Robinson.
So just for clarification, so currently, those funds are used for what now? That sales?
I would assume that they're going to be transportation.
So we don't really, they just kind of go into the pot?
Yes.
To answer your question, I think.
Yeah, Delegate Robinson, for a number of decades now, those funds are transferred in Part 3 of the budget to help balance the general fund budget and offset the cost of other Chesapeake Bay related activities. But in essence, they're
questions, Delegate Robinson.
Yes, this, because I'm new at this, and I'm
Sure.
hoping I'm not bogging this down too much,
It's
and I
okay.
can do this as a sidebar, but, so, what were they originally set up to do? Because you just said that, so they aren't used to what they were originally set up to do.
There are provisions in the code that would have them go directly to Chesapeake Bay-related activities. Currently, they are going to general fund to offset the cost of Chesapeake Bay activities, but they are in the larger column that is the general fund at this point.
Delegate Robinson, I think Delegate Bloxham probably already knows, Mr. Crockett probably has talked to him about this. You know, our longstanding policy has been that we don't create funds without the funding.
Yes, sir.
And so this is a cart and horse situation here, which while it may be a good idea, puts us in a little bit different posture than what we are accustomed to. So,
Yes, sir, I would answer, Mr. Chairman. I agree with that policy. I think in this case, since the budget amendment is out there, and if we are going to borrow money as the other bill that you suggested, we need to have a fund to actually disperse those funds through.
thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Delegate Sickles.
I just want to make a couple comments. One, I don't vote on dredging bills, as you may have noticed, and because my company is in the business, but we would never do a project, a shallow draft project anyway, because we can't, it's big. But this is very common in other states as the Corps of Engineers budget has been strained. There are 95 channels. They're federally authorized in Virginia, these small shallow draft projects, but the Corps of Engineers doesn't fund them. And so I was interested in the witnesses' comment that there were state responsible channels. I didn't realize that was true. So that's interesting. I was wondering if there is any, and this is a question for Ann maybe, we have this port fund. We have some of our gas tax revenue goes to fund the Virginia Port Authority. Does anything in that fund ever go toward other navigation channels? Is that a source of funds? And if so, then we would solve Delegate Bloxham's problem.
To my knowledge, none of that has ever gone towards those sorts of activities, no. They've all gone to the Virginia port facilities themselves, and the revenue that's been available has been less than sufficient even to fund the cost of all of their central port projects.
All right. Committee operates on motions if there's no further discussion. Delegate Garrett?
Mr. Chairman, as you know, Delegate Bloxham Senate bill, I think it's 693, is still out there, still floating. It's passed through Senate Finance, passed through the Senate, and then was sent back to their ag. It's still a moving target. As you know, sir, we still don't have a lot of clarity at all about where revenues and expenses are going to be for the Commonwealth. That is still very much a moving target. And as Chairman Peace had said, typically the practice of the committee is not to establish a fund without some sort of discrete sort of funding sources. Totally get it about using those opportunities and leveraging them. So to that point, Mr. Chairman, I would think the best posture to have this in, at least at this juncture, is probably to lay this on the table. Still a moving part. There'll still be some conjugates coming over from the Senate, I suspect, in some sense.
Yes, sir.
So I would move
Is that a motion?
Yes, sir.
Delegate
I'm sorry, I
Garrett?
shouldn't speak to it without
That's
making that
fine.
motion, but.
Forgive you. So Delegate Garrett moves to lay this bill gently on the table. Is there a second to that motion? Motion's properly second. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion, that's true. Okay, all those in favor, cast your vote to lay House Bill 575 on the table. Close the roll. The bill is laid on the table 6-1. Thank you. Delegate Stolly, welcome back.
Thank you, good to be back.
Mr. Chairman, you have Delegate Yancey's House Bill 453 as well as Delegate Horrocks 1489. Delegate Yancey.
Delegate Yancey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. What we passed out of transportation was a substitute
And what this bill simply says in a nutshell is for economic development money for airport authorities, just clarification that what we sent you is indeed correct, and that the records and receipts would indicate as such. That in essence is what the bill does. Mr. Chairman, as you may recall, there were some issues at use of economic development money in Newport News Airport. This money just seeks to address the transparency issue, specifically in regards to the tracking of the funds of the money that comes from the Commonwealth to these airports. And I'll also bring out, Mr. Chairman, that the legislation also addresses that sensitive information that insofar sometimes the EDB is judicious in what information they want sent out in order to be able to protect whatever deals are working on. So that this bill also addresses that, and that can be addressed in lines 20 through 23.
Any questions for the patron? Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mark from the Department of Aviation, we support this. It's just, the department spends some $27 million a year that we send to airports, and this simply has those airports sending back information about how they're using it. In fact, I think the department are already working on process. A good bit of this information is already coming in for other reasons. But anyway, to make this as painless as possible, we want to probably have this thing where we will send out, here's what we understand we have sent your way, and on these projects, we understand this is how you've spent it on those projects. Please confirm. Trying to make this easy, but just think that the information would be helpful for us all to know, all be able to know that we're using money for the right things.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the bill? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Mark Fortney. I'm the Airport Director of Lynchburg Regional Airport. I'm also here today representing the Virginia Airport Operators Council. In terms of this bill, while VAOC certainly appreciates the changes that were made in the form of this substitute, VAOC continues to oppose this bill in this substitute form on the basis of its redundant and unnecessary mandate for additional reporting and open records requirements that were thoroughly addressed in various forms last year as well as the year before. For example, during the 2016 General Assembly session, House Bill 30 directed the Department of Aviation to undertake a full review of its funding, its programs, and the allocation of funds by airports. In June of 2017, the Inspector General's Office completed a full audit of DOAV procedures regarding oversight of state-funded programs. As you will recall, last year's Senate Bill 1417 required, among other things, that the Virginia Aviation Board annually report to the Governor and the General Assembly use of Commonwealth Airport Fund revenues. It also stipulated that state monies not be used for operating costs or for purposes related to supporting the airline directly or indirectly. Also, as part of Senate Bill 1417, air carrier airports are now required to submit entitlement utilization plans for approval by the Virginia Aviation Board to outline how their state entitlement funds are intended to be spent. Last but not least, last year's House Bill 900 directed the department to undertake a full audit of the use of all department funds allocated by airport over the past 3 years and submit a report to the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Senate Finance, and House Transportation Committees no later than November 1. As all part of that process, the Department of Aviation's newly revised 2017 Master Agreement for airports as recipients of state airport funds funding includes considerable auditing rights and requirements and other more stringent terms and conditions. Not to mention the fact that the existing Virginia Aviation Board and Department of Aviation policies and procedures for the use of Commonwealth Airport discretionary funds require formal grant agreements with all payments reviewed by Department of Aviation prior to the lease. Beyond those state requirements, airports are under considerable local control and oversight, with all public airports operating in capital budgets subject to public review and disclosure, and local government authority approval. And lastly, of course, all publicly owned airports are also subject to Virginia's Freedom of Information Act statute. And just on a technical note, we also have concerns over the release of sensitive security information as part of this bill. The fact that it is problematic in its present form and would create problems for the airports to be able to comply with that. So with that in mind, we feel unnecessary bill, it's redundant, and we continue to request it.
Delegate Yancey, the substitute was adopted in committee, is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Move adoption.
I think it's been adopted.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman?
Transportation.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Delegate Garrett.
So I have a question, so I don't know, Mark, maybe this is you, I don't know, or Delegate Yancey or something, so I'm hearing sort of he said, she said, and I don't know your space well enough. So the Virginia Aviation Board, you all feel like you have enough accounting, enough reporting, enough transparency, and the Virginia Airport Operators Council says, or you all said you have enough, and you all say we need more.
Actually,
I'm confused.
from the department's perspective, the way this will end up working, a good bit of the information comes in today. But to the extent that this will add information that we receive, that will be useful for full disclosure and transparency in how the funds. So, if it doesn't add a substantial burden to the airports, then it's sort of no harm, no foul to them. And I think it won't add extra burden to them.
Mr. Chairman, follow
Delegate Garrett.
up? Mark, I'm guessing Mr. Gordy wouldn't drive 2 hours up here and drive 2 hours back. We didn't think it was some sort of a burden, and maybe he's just representing his folks. But could you help me understand what pieces of information are you not getting today that you believe going forward you will get?
Well, I think that realistically, a lot of the information that's in the bill, we're receiving today, and this is just a confirmation of it, that's all.
Mr. Chair, if I may, in working with some of the smaller airports, we were able to come up with this language that they felt would be helpful for them, and certainly not put them in such a difficult position. But as you may recall, the situation that took place at the Newport News Airport, there was some challenges getting that transparency, and a lot of it has been addressed each year. What this bill seeks to achieve is clarifying language, lack of better expression, to be able to address some of the issues that were challenges in order to make certain that the EDA money, which we have addressed in previous legislation, would be specifically targeted for what was necessary and needed, but this language will now make sure that the transparency, the information is being relayed back on the state, like a spider walking on a mirror, that all facts are lining up. So what we are asking for, they have, the two are lining up, which is some of the issues that's come before us as the information of the economic development money to Newport News is becoming more and more, as we learn more and more about the facts.
So just one follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Garrett.
So Doug Yancey, so there obviously some information that the Newport News Airport believed it needed, and they weren't getting from the airport operators, that this would now grant clarity to that, or it's going to package it better, or I'm just trying to, because kind of what I thought I heard Mark say is it really didn't do anything. I didn't want to leave with that thought.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Garrett, it's actually the other way around. It's what the state of Virginia was trying to procure for the information, that the money that was going to Newport News and what information they were coming back. So what this seeks to be able to achieve is that the Commonwealth will know whatever money is being invested for EDA in an airport, and then the information being relied back to the two line up exactly, the receipts line up, the money that gets lined up, whatever sensitive information, obviously, per FOIA rules would either be guarded if, say, a new airline was being recruited or something like that. But this is just making sure that all the information is indeed lining up so that what happened at the airport in Newport News doesn't happen at other airports. So the taxpayer money is disclosed and it's understood, and then the receipts are all lined up so that that money that's needed for economic development only lines up for that money line up for economic development and not other things that might fall under that umbrella, which has been some of the challenges from what we've learning more and more from what happened at the Newport News Airport, or some of the hiccups, if you will, that have happened. So this is just seeking to be able to make sure that everything's lining up exactly.
And Delegate Yancey, just for clarification, this policy has been adopted by the Transportation Committee, correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
We're here to look at the fiscal aspect.
Correct. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Pease.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend reporting House Bill 453.
There's a motion to report House Bill 453. Is there a second? It's been moved and properly second to report House Bill 453. All those in favor signify on the electronic voting board. Please close the roll. Bill reports 8-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
Delegate LaRock. So just so that we're all on the same page, we have a number of bills coming up from transportation. A number of those bills will be addressing the same issue. So we will not be voting on this bill today, but certainly we're happy to hear any testimony, particularly if anybody's come from a long way here to testify. Delegate LaRock, please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I hope this, all this paper that we're handing out doesn't look like I intend to over-present, but this whole string of roads, Dulles Greenway, Dulles Toll Road, which merge into I-66 inside the Beltway and outside the Beltway, can get a little confusing. So I decided the easiest way to convey this is just to show it graphically that Greenway is the first section. If you start from the west and head east of 267 is the route number. Dulles Toll Road, that is labeled number 2, and that is also Route 267, and they eventually merge into I-66 inside the Beltway, which is labeled, the Beltway itself is labeled 3. So number 4, inside the Beltway of I-66, it's really what this bill it proposes to modify in 2 ways. So I have prepared and shared a one-pager that describes the bill, and I'll just, if there's no questions on the general layout that's depicted on the maps with the key, there is some information attached to the key, but you certainly, I think, can probably just take a quick look at that if you would like, and then if there's any questions. If not, I'll just move on to this one pager that talks specifically about what the bill proposes.
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Sickles.
before we move on, it might be good for the committee to know that most of this toll is voluntary. You don't have to pay an alternative route. People didn't have the opportunity to ride in their car by themselves ever during rush hour until recently. And this looks like these are mandatory tolls that you have to take these things to get to Washington DC. Just want to point out that's not the case. And secondly, if you just get a second person to ride in your car, it's free. The idea is to move people, not cars, and it is the Dulles Greenway part you can't do anything about, it's a private road. But when you get inside the Beltway, it is a voluntary action to pay the toll.
Yeah, point well taken. I certainly don't disagree.
Mr. Chairman?
Holding a job.
One second. Go ahead, respond.
Oh, holding a job that requires you to commute from Leesburg to Washington DC is certainly a choice, but given the level of congestion in the area, this is by far the fastest route to get back and forth to work. The majority of commuters do take because choosing an alternate often would mean another hour, maybe 2 each day in traffic. You're exactly right. Portions of this are voluntary.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to that?
Yes.
The only people who went inside the Beltway by themselves in a car during rush hour were cheating, were breaking the law prior to recently. That's my point.
Delegate Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Delegate LaRock, but is it not the case, as Delegate Sickles basically suggested, it's a choice for everybody, they could choose not to do it. If no one chose to do it, the tolls would be negligible, because are not the tolls predicated on the need to maintain a federal speed limit of 45 miles per hour or whatever it is, and therefore if there's more cars on that, the tolls go up and up and up. So the argument that, well, it's just a choice and people don't need to take it and people can sort of choose to do it, it strikes me that in fact is consumer behavior that's happening now, and that's what's driving the tolls. Did I miss something here?
Well, if you're speaking specifically of just I-66 inside the Beltway, it is a choice. The formula has been set with a 55 mile per hour speed limit for a bracketed time. One of the primary objectives of this is not to eliminate the benefits of dynamic tolling, but for the period of time between when this would go into effect in the case of we would propose a toll cap of $200 per month at the advice of, after consultation with the Deputy Secretary, providing enough time for information to be provided to the public. We would begin that October 1st and would terminate that sunset when these inside the Beltway lanes increased the capacity. It is a choice, and so we're trying to provide some temporary relief from tolls that are very, very unpredictable. So it is a monetary refund over 200, but it also provides some level of predictability so that as you choose your path in the morning between, say, Route 7 and Route 50, which would require some pretty significant detours, you would have some degree of predictability, for lack of a better word, that you would not be spending, you would not come to the gate and find that 3 days in a row you were going to pay, say, a $50 toll and reach an astronomical limit. The tolls do vary dramatically. It is very unpredictable, but as you've suggested or stated, it is dynamic tolling, and the market drives that to maintain the level of free movement and free flow.
Mr. Chairman?
Delegate Garrett.
Nick, let me try that differently. Nick, can I ask you basically the same question? My question is.
Let me finish.
Okay,
Paging before
sure.
we go on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for the paging? Delegate Rock, so with your 200 cap,
Yes.
once I've met that 200 cap, it's free. Correct? I gotta use that, 200 cap a month, I gotta use it as much as I want to, and it's free.
That's correct.
And if we have a bunch of people meet that cap and they're using it free, it's dynamic tolling, doesn't that actually drive up the toll for everyone else on that road?
Well, you're asking me to forecast what the effect of someone would be when they drive up to a sign who perhaps maybe has or hasn't done any math on what their previous tolls were for that month. But you'd have to make a decision when you reach the point where you're seeing a sign that says $30. You'd have to, I guess, do the math or do it ahead of time to know how much you'd spend. But certainly it is very possible that people would utilize this road at a regular basis, calculate, say, on a Thursday or Friday of the third week of the month, that yes, I've reached my $200 and that this day would become free. Effectively, that's exactly right, yes.
But it wouldn't just be free, it would drive up everybody else's on there because you have more people using it. So your neighbors are actually paying for your free pass at that time. Is that correct?
Your neighbors would be paying a higher toll. It's conceivable that would be the outcome, yes.
Thank you.
So, I do have another question. Sure.
Delegate Garrett.
So maybe this is a question for Mr. Donahue. Is there a floor to what the toll would be in the contract? If only one person chose, Delegate Sickles suggesting that this is just consumer behavior and everybody has a choice to do it, and if the tolls are too expensive, then they would potentially choose. Is there a floor to what the cost would be for a toll if, say, only one person were to use the new road?
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Garrett, Nick Donahue, Deputy Secretary of Transportation. There are 4 different gantries, which are the toll collection points on the 10 miles of I-66 inside the Beltway. I believe the minimum toll is 25 cents. So depending on the number of gantries you went through, your pay is if there's extremely low traffic, 25 cents to as high as
And Mr. Chairman, just one follow-up, and I hate to belabor it, but Nick, to the chairman's point, if in fact, and the Delegate LaRocque's point, if in fact these tolls are much higher than what I think people expected or anticipated, whatever that number is, whatever their expectation and anticipations were, if they are that high, since the chairman has acknowledged it's dynamic tolling, doesn't that mean that consumers are choosing to consume this opportunity more, and that's what's driving the cost up, is more and more people want to use this as opposed to they can choose not to?
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Garrett, you have summarized the issue correctly. When we're seeing these higher tolls of $40 or so, or tend to be around 8:30 in the morning, which is Delegate Sickles noted was previously during the HOV restricted period. So these are people who have been given a new choice to be able to use the facility. As you noted, there are federal rules that require us to increase the toll to ensure free flow traffic. And I think what we are seeing is there are people, I think it was around 17, who were willing to pay $40-some that one day to drive that particular time, who did see the sign at least a mile and a half in advance, saw a second sign before they ultimately chose to enter the road, did have options to take the Beltway, GW Parkway, or the parallel routes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions for the delegate? Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this bill? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this bill?
Mr. Chairman, Nick Donahue, Deputy Secretary of Transportation. I just want to express the administration does have some concerns with this refund program. We don't know exactly what the implications of this would be, as Delegate Rock noted in his presentation earlier. We are concerned though that it could result in higher tolls. It's essentially, as you all have noted, it's dynamic pricing. The more people that are insensitive or inelastic to the toll, the higher the toll is, because there's less space available for those who would be subject to the toll rates. And so that just create concern that we're creating one favored class at a certain point that has impacts on other folks who might choose to use the road. In the 95 express lanes, 83% of people use the road 5 or less times a month. It's really supposed to be a choice when you have a certain type of event or other thing that requires you to get to a place with arrivals, fast travel time. It's not really intended to be something that one would do every day.
Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to the bill? Last comments.
Yeah, well, interesting term the Deputy Secretary's used, favored class. That is a good lead-in for me to describe the second component that we've asked to have adjusted. That is, when this tolling inside the Beltway was first introduced to the public, the proposition was that both lanes would be tolled uniformly, have the same dynamic tolling system. So all the equipment has been installed in eastbound, westbound lanes. But somewhere along the line, the favored class of people were designated to be the people inside the Beltway further east, and it was decided that they would not be toll payers if they commuted west in the morning and east in the afternoon. So they would most distinctly have been given favored class status. The people that I represent come from the Greenway, the Dulles Toll Road, and the reason we're asking for some small relief is that their tolls could easily reach in excess of $50 or $60 each way. Now you're exactly right. That is an optional toll, but many of these people have families, and they just choose the best choice for them would be one that gets them home to their families an hour or two earlier. This is a very limited period of time that we're asking for some moderation in the tolls, a little bit of assurance that if they use this stretch of road before the additional lane capacity comes online, probably would be a year and a half to a year, that there's a little bit of predictability so that they can develop their budgets and develop their schedules, knowing that they're not going to be getting in line for what easily could be a $25, $30, $40 toll when they are approaching this route. So granted, there are a variety of considerations, but this is not a permanent buy down like has been provided for the people in Hampton Roads. The governor stepped in there when tolls were going to soar up to somewhere below $2 and spent $82 million in transportation maintenance funds. And the second round of that buy down, I think, brought it to a total of $300 million because the effect, in his words, not a direct quote, was concerns that this would impact families and the economy. So we agree with him in concept. Only in Northern Virginia, the amount is far, far in excess of that. We're not asking for a buy down. We're asking for two components that would generally offset each other. Put the reverse tolling in effect on the reverse tolling, and that would probably end up being revenue neutral when you bring in a little additional revenue from that, and then moderate these tolls at about $10 per day over a period of a month. That's $200, which is very close to the average toll that Deputy Secretary Donahue has stated is approximately $11 both directions. So a very small incremental change. I think it would provide a lot of improvement in the quality of life for the people in the westernmost part of the Northern Virginia region. Any other questions?
Just ask some clarifying questions.
Sure.
Because I'm a little bit unsure. So you want reverse tolling on 66, would that be dynamic tolling or would that be a set rate?
Yeah, so the simple answer is it would be a dynamic tolling. So all of the equipment that now tolls people coming from the west is operational in the morning, tolling people coming east to west. Excuse me, west to east. I've got it backwards. From the west heading east in the morning, people pay tolls. If they're heading west in the morning, they pay nothing. That equipment has effectively been turned off. And then flipping it around in the evening, when the people who live in the west head home, they're paying tolls, but the people who are working in the west and driving home pay nothing. So it's a very, very inequitable situation. Someone decided to make the eastbound commuters the unfavored class, and we'd like to flip that around.
Questions for Pete? Delegate Sickles.
Your constituents have to go home at night, don't they? And they get a free ride through 66 at night. I mean, why would you want to toll them on the way home as well? Or am I got that wrong? They are being tolled on the way home.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear, but, so 2 lanes in each direction.
Okay.
If you're living in the west, and then you are not part of the favored class in the east, then you pay tolls coming in the morning, and you pay tolls going home.
Right.
We call those regular commuters. The reverse commuters are the ones that are heading out of the more populated area going west, and they're the ones that get a free ride.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Keith.
it's just based on the posture that we're in, I move that we take this bill back for the day and continue to look at all the other issues that are still before the House and the standing committee related to this subject as one.
So there'll be a number of bills coming up, as we mentioned before, and we'll address those all as a group. So without objection, this bill's back for the day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Anything else to come before the committee? I'm being told that we will likely have a special meeting later on this week, and we'll set that as we get closer. Thank you all very much.